Okay, well, Jen and I are so excited to talk with Shannon O'Grady today. Not only is she an inspiring CEO of a fantastic brand, growing brand in the supplements and healthcare space, but she's also an inspiration on how to traverse career changes, midlife changes, and really all things getting energized for your back half. As we talk to Shannon today, she's going to kind of crack some code for us about how to know your supplements are actually clean and healthy for you, and then how to think about what's the next on the horizon of things you might want to be looking out for. So, with no further ado, we're going to jump in. We are so excited to be here today. Today we are super lucky because we have Shannon O'Grady with us, and she's the CEO of Gnarly. Now, you all remember Gnarly because it's one of our favorite products. We had them in our favorite episode. Tons of different reasons why, and we're going to let Shannon talk a little bit about that first.
Absolutely.
But we're just going to jump in and introduce you, Shannon. Say thank you for taking time with us today. You are an aspiring and inspiring midlife woman. We'd love to hear a little bit about kind of how you ended up at Gnarly and in this role.
Sure. Well, thank you both for having me. I'd say I feel the same way about the two of you. So it's great to have this conversation. I've been a research and nutrition nerd since the 7th grade. So early on, just really loved how scientific research allows you to address these questions that you have a lot of interest in. And for me, that started with food and nutrition research, kind of in conjunction with being an active individual and having kind of more endurance goals. And so the research piece, because all of us know that if you don't fuel correctly, it's often hard to reach many of those goals. It fell in quite nicely with what I enjoyed doing in my free time. In my PhD program, we often used to joke that there was an inverse correlation between progress on our thesis and our VO2 max, because often, we would be spending more time maybe on the training piece and less time on the research piece. But both of those things have always been a big part of my life. So being active and moving, and my interest had always been in nutritional physiology. So how animals, humans included, process different nutrients, how our physiology and morphology kind of ties into diets that are consumed. And at that same time, I got really interested in endurance sports and started doing Ironman and more ultra running. And a good friend of mine who was getting her PhD in chemistry, we would always joke that there was an inverse correlation between our VO2 max and progress on our thesis, because as anyone knows, obviously it takes a lot of time to train for things like that. And we both would have rather been training than doing some of the research piece. But it was also this nice overlap and connection between my research interests and my interests as an athlete and someone who just enjoys, being outside and in the mountains. And that really planted the seed of trying to move my career in that direction. And it led to my taking a few postdoc positions in labs that had more of a correlation with human nutrition, one looking more at epigenetics and methylation of different genes, and then one looking at using stable isotopes as a marker of human water metabolism. But then I was ready to move out of academia. Work-life balance is super hard, and I wanted to stay in Utah. I wanted to stay near the mountains, and often in tenure track positions, you're not afforded those kind of choices of where you want to live. So at that point, I transitioned into industry, kind of trying to chase that dream of making sports nutrition something that I did for a career. And I applied to pretty much every job that I saw as my dream job. So it didn't Cliff Bar, Hammer Nutrition, just applied to all these different companies. And I think in academia, I really built a thick skin for rejection, whether it was, tough feedback from my mentors and principal investigators, whether it was tough feedback, when I submitted a paper for peer-reviewed research, you just get rejected a lot. And so that I think was good because I definitely didn't get any of those jobs. But I did get some, right? I did get some jobs at the time that weren't my ideal jobs. But now, retrospectively, right, hindsight is 2020, the skills that I learned in those positions serve me so well in what I do at Gnarly, both in terms of being brand facing and what brands need to be concerned with creating quality products. And then on the manufacturing and quality side around FDA regulation of supplements, third-party quality audits. And all of that came together really nicely when I joined the team at Gnarly. So I started working in formulations and quality, and then took on a more operations role, and then stepped into the role of CEO last year.
Fantastic.
Talk to us about that transition. Because I feel like, we have a little bit of parallel stories going from academics and almost more like a clinician scientist into this kind of business operator role that I know I have felt unprepared for at times, and lean on a lot of my people that are much more business savvy. But just talk to us about that transition, especially kind of being where you were in life to take on that challenge.
Yeah. My dream job was never to be a CEO. But I think having a vision for what you want a company to become, or believing so strongly in a brand and a difference that a brand can make, can kind of focus you or push aside some of those other ideas for what you may have in terms of career advancement. And for me, that's really what it looked like when I stepped into this position. I think women as a whole, or I hear it a lot from my peers, deal with imposter syndrome on the regular. And I think that's, in my perspective, I think that's because we wear a lot of hats, as whether it's partners, mothers, positions in our careers, positions within athletics, friendships, that often it's hard to take off those hats and switch them so quickly. And while I do think my experience in graduate school, I was just speaking with us about this today, prepared me in a lot of ways for a role in business that I wouldn't have thought would translate at the time. I often look back at the skills that I'm trying to build now and think like, well, would an MBA have been better? Had I known back then, would I have gone another direction? But at that same time, I think thinking outside the box and being able to look at problems in a new and unique way, or maybe that vision is a little bit different than what you would see from a typical nutrition company. All of those things, I think, only get better when you don't have the exact same pedigree as everybody else in the space. So while I do often feel like I might be lacking in some skills that would be beneficial in the role that I currently play, I also realize that some of the skills I do bring to the table are unique.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's, one of the data points that has always stuck with me, because I think most women, if not all, do have some sort of an imposter syndrome in different roles, especially if you're changing expertise and the mechanics that are underlying or perceived to be underlying that expertise. One of the stats that stood out to me is like when they were doing a massive survey of women and men applicants for jobs, and women would be like 95% qualified for the job, but they would say, I don't think I should apply. And men would be like 30%, and they would say, I think I should get it. It's just a perspective difference. And there's good and bad to both, but sometimes you got to put on that, I think I should get the job, even if you can come up with all the reasons why there's something that there's a gap,
Yeah. And I think part of it too was this idea that, I've always taken this stance, and especially in academia or in the lab that I came up in, you can't be an expert in everything, right? And so that's where really the beauty of collaboration is realized, because when you work with people that have different specialties and share ideas, then it takes the project that much further. And I think initially I had this thought that as CEO I had to be an expert in everything, and I think over the past few months I've come to this realization that it's still that same beauty of collaboration. I need to know enough to be dangerous, to ask the right questions. But really, I think the main core competency of my job is to hire people that I trust to do their jobs, and then do everything I can to ensure their success.
Yes.
I love that.
Yes.
I love that. And I think that is such a vital message. And I know I get asked a lot, like, how did you get your confidence? How did you get to this point? And a lot of it is saying, I'm bringing a skill set, and it might be a unique skill set compared to other people that hold this role. But that's the reason you asked me to do this, or that's the reason why you want me to come and talk, or that's the reason why you are the CEO, because they recognize that. And I think just instead of looking at what our shortcomings are, I love your mindset of saying, yeah, you know what? But I bring all of these things, and it lets me see things from a different angle and from a different perspective, and using the people around you to help, fill in the gaps where there are some. And I think that's just such a powerful message.
Mm-hmm. Well, I love that entire story for, career transition, role transition, and also just really embracing the core competency and the nutrition product base, which is what the consumer really wants when you show up with the end part of the brand. So that's the come from right there.
Yeah. I mean, when I discovered Gnarly, I remember I had a friend who was a pro skier who sponsored an early athlete of Gnarly, and I discovered the brand through him. And I was like, what an interesting name for something that you're supposed to taste. but it does stick with you. And when I looked at the brand and how products were formulated, there was a lot of early overlap between, like, if I created my own brand from scratch, what I would do with it, and what I could see as the direction Gnarly was going. And so that was what initially drew me to the company. And then it's been great, I think, early on to that point, like Gnarly's, one of Gnarly's founders and the CEO at the time, Eli Kerr, very much trusted me, to do my job, and allowed me to put my own kind of take on what Gnarly should be, and what I thought Gnarly should contribute to the nutrition space. And so that was empowering, and I think that's the same kind of thing that I'm trying to make sure that my team feels like I'm doing for them.
I love that. So as you're thinking about Gnarly and all the cool products that are the brand is bringing to market, and we're thinking about midlife women, are there a couple of things, if you were like, hey, I've got this audience of midlife women, they're just like 2 or 3 things that I wish I could share from a product and brand perspective, and then also just your nutritional expertise? Yeah,
I mean, I think as women, we, I don't know if it starts when I have a tween right now. So, and I'm starting to see some early signs of this. We're constantly, whether it's society, giving us an idea of what women should look like, or whether it's constantly hearing about like the latest diet, or, whether or not when you put your feet together, your thighs should touch, or whether or not someone, has too much muscle and looks like a man. Like, our appearance is always part of the conversation. And one of the things that I'm trying to build into the Gnarly brand is, beyond like building a relationship of trust with our consumers, is this idea that Gnarly and athletics and movement is really for, we say, every body or everybody. So building an inclusive brand that meets you where you are, whether or not you need our products, but empowers you to get out and move the way you love to move, and find habits, whether they're nutrition based or activity based, that are sustainable for the long term. And we're very much in a society where prescriptives are constantly thrown out, like, you should do this, you should do this. And while I think that's good, we need to, give guidelines to people so that they can have a long health span. I also think that often shoulds creates this space of judgment where if you're not doing them, you're not going to measure up. So when I talk to people, I like to meet them where they are and hear what they are doing and what's working for them, so that when I give advice or give things that I think should be focused on, it's not like way out in left field and we're representing this huge change. In general, even though I'm the CEO of a supplement company, I like to always emphasize that supplements should be supplemental, and they are great for those of us, which I think many of us fall in this category, where like we just don't have enough time despite our best intentions.
Right.
And I think protein intake is a thing that we should all focus on. As we age, we want to keep on muscle mass, both so we can keep moving and so we can keep our bone density at a healthy level as hormones are changing, and we see the negative impact of that on both muscle mass and on bone health. So protein supplements are an easy way to make sure that you're hitting those goals, because often it can be hard to do through food alone. Right. If you're able to, then that, more power to you. And if you're not, looking to a protein powder that works with your diet, whether that's plant-based or incorporates some animal matter, like I think that's an easy way to hit that goal. Secondarily, creatine. I'm a big fan of creatine. I know you guys are too. Yes. And I've been on some podcasts where we've talked about like creatine having a moment. And I love it because creatine's been in sports nutrition research for decades, but I think it's always been pitched at bodybuilders and mostly men. Mm-hmm. And because of that, there's, I think, a lot of myths circulating around what creatine does, how it works, and how people that take it can benefit from it. And it kind of, I think, just compounds what we were talking about with protein, where it's just going to make adding muscle mass that much easier, which in the long term is going to, have multiple benefits in terms of continuing to move, continuing to be active, and, in keeping that health span going into our later years. The third, is a pretty basic one, but vitamin D, I think, and omegas are two vitamins that and essential fatty acids that I recommend everyone take. Sunshine obviously is really important for us to get, but we also have to look at too much exposure and the negatives of that. People live in different environments, have different pigments in their skin. Both of those things can affect the exposure we have to vitamin D. Lifestyle, I work in an office during 10 to 2 p.m. when I really should be in the sunlight. So finding a vitamin D that works with your diet, whether it's plant-based or is from lanolin, which is some vegetarians can use, and then finding an omega-3 fatty acid also. Those are two other things I would add to my diet.
And how do you think, I feel like another place and where we talk to women a lot about using some of these supplements is for cognitive health. I think that sometimes when there's apprehension about entering into trying some of these things because they're still scared they're going to look like a bodybuilder or have some of these more negative physical findings, we're starting to try to really say it's also really important for your cognition, especially with in combination with omegas. What are you seeing in that space, or what, I would love to hear your knowledge and take on what people are saying around that.
Yeah. So creatine, there's been some really great research coming out looking at the benefits of creatine for cognitive health. Most of the research is under stress. So whether it's sleep deprivation, whether you're looking at performance on kind of acuity tests with individuals that are of an older age, but at its like simplest, without going into the mechanism, creatine really helps with energy transfer in our bodies. And really that's how our brains function. Creatine's also, found to be super helpful for traumatic brain injury, and that's related to interruptions in that energy transfer in the brain. So I think that research is only going to continue to evolve, but beyond the benefits of putting on, I'm glad you brought that up, and maintaining muscle, like that is also a benefit that we can look to for creatine. There's also some interesting research in post-traumatic stress disorder and depression showing that creatine supplementation may help in conjunction with prescriptives. So that's also an interesting area of research. As you brought up, there's great research around omega-3s, essential fatty acids for cognition, interesting research with Alzheimer's, turmeric and omega-3s overlap in that space. I've always wanted to create a product that like combines those two because I think they're so synergistic. But yeah, I think both of those are, taking away any other benefits, like the benefits to brain health are a reason to take them in and of themselves.
That's my 83-year-old mother and her 86-year-old friend are creatine junkies now because they've been hearing so much about this. So,
and are they bulky?
They're not bulky. They are walking, and that is great.
Yeah,
they do not have to worry about not being able to fit into your clothes.
Yeah, I also think we often get attached to numbers on a scale, and similar to carbohydrates, when you take creatine, it's stored with some water. So will you see a little bit of water weight gain? Yes, you might, but it's minimal. It is water weight gain. It's not fat gain. You can see changes as you use it in conjunction with resistance training that may be align with better body composition, which I think is something we all want to increase lean mass. But it's amazing how many people I've talked to that water weight gain is really the main reason why they are not taking it. And some research that I've seen that's longer term research has actually shown that there's an equilibrium that's achieved through long-term use of creatine in terms of total body water when comparing folks that have been on creatine to folks that took a placebo. Yeah. So I think it may not be as much of a concern as many people make it out to be. And as you pointed out, like I think the benefits far outweigh the negatives.
Although, one of the things that I came across when we were researching creatine, because we'd also heard a little bit about that, was that it might be more related to the way it's been prescriptive in the bodybuilding world, that you have to take these loading doses, 3 times what a normal daily dose would be. And that the reasons why most women midlife would be taking creatine, that's not a requirement. So you could just walk in the door and start taking the daily dose.
I'll have to check in because in both scenarios, we're trying to get the creatine stores in our muscles saturated. So whether you're doing it in a loading phase and doing it in a shorter amount of time, or doing it like you suggested and taking the maintenance dose from the start, the endpoint is the same. So we're still storing the same amount of creatine. Yeah. So I'm curious. I'll have to spend a little more time. From my understanding, there wasn't a difference, but if there was, that would be amazing.
I think another reason I really enjoy talking about this, especially with people like you, Shannon, is I think high-end, very reputable supplements have been out of reach for a lot of people because they don't know the difference, right? If you're not an elite athlete who has exposure to these really high-end brands, it's sometimes really overwhelming when you go in the drugstore and there's 42 different types of vitamin D and you're like, well, which one do I pick? And so how, one is we want to make sure people can find Gnarly and where to go to find it, to purchase, et cetera. But can you just talk a little bit about what makes Gnarly different and the kind of rigor that all of your products go through? Because we get that question a lot. Like, how do I pick something in a marketplace that is not very regulated, that I know is quality, that I know what I'm getting, I know what it says on the bottles, what's in the bottle? And that's, again, one of a huge reason we wanted you on here. We believe in your products and your company and what you guys are, not only who you are as a person, but what you're creating. And we want to make sure people understand that there is a difference. Like, this is and it's important to understand that.
I appreciate that so much. I would say that finding supplement brands that are third-party tested and making sure you know and trust that third party is critical. So we are NSF certified. NSF, you could look at your dishwasher, you could pick up your pot. If you see like a round circle and says NSF on it, they audit all different forms of manufacturing and finished products, one of which is the supplement industry. And so there are 2 levels of certification for NSF. There's content certification, which means they test for contaminants, so microbes, heavy metals, and pesticides. The formulation goes through a toxicology screen. So they have a board that looks at the formula, looks at the total recommended daily dosage. So not just what's on the supplement facts, but are they telling you to take it 3 times a day? Well, if you take that 3 times a day, are the doses that the consumer is getting
I didn't
safe?
realize that. So that's a good additional filter.
Yeah.
That's the dosing.
And then they also test for label claims. So exactly what you said, making sure that what is on the label is actually in the product. So that contaminant testing and that label claim testing is actually required by the FDA. But to your point, like the FDA, supplements pop up all the time. They do not have the bandwidth to test all of these products, nor to make sure that the testing is actually being done. And so companies that have invested in third-party testing really have gone the extra mile to make sure the consumer knows that they're getting what they paid for. We also have a certain assortment of our products that are NSF for sport tested. I would love to get to a point where we can test all of our products, but it's pretty expensive testing. And those are our top flavors, and they're tested for all substances on the World Anti-Doping Agency banned substances list. So it's like 300 substances. Really what pro athletes are tested for when they are tested for doping. But I think also for those of us that are hobbyists, like I don't want that in my product either. I want to make sure that I'm getting what's on the label and nothing else. And so there are a few different companies that do this level of testing. There's USP, which is US Pharmacopoeia. I think that does label claim testing. Informed Choice, I think they do contents testing and sports certification. So if you look for products that have these certifications, I think it really gets at addressing some of the concerns around the lack of regulation enforcement in the supplement industry. I'll also say I've been seeing this pop up a lot. So GMP is the acronym for Good Manufacturing Practices, which are what the FDA regulations are called that the supplement industry have to abide by. There's no GMP certification, but often I see GMP put on brands, makes it look like I've even had companies tell me like, well, we're GMP certified. And my next question is always, who gave you that certification? Like it's not a certification.
That's so valuable for people to understand.
We've asked a couple different people that question, and I don't think we've ever gotten such a succinct and helpful answer to that. And so thank you, because I think there is a lot of mystery. And I think as misinformation is abundant and laws are changing around that, I think it's really important that people learn how to read things really carefully. And so they can be their own advocates.
The other thing I'll bring up that kind of falls into, I'd love to see this get more attention, but it falls into a gray area in the supplement space in that it's not really covered by some of these third-party auditors. But I think it is kind of shady when companies do this, are proprietary blends. So I would say Greens products, one very well known and talked about and promoted by many podcasts, Greens product right now. While they do have some great quality certifications, they have what are called proprietary blends in their product, which are blends that are usually given a fancy marketing name like super anti-inflammatory alkaloid energy blend. And they give like a total amount for that blend. Let's say, just to make it easy, it's 5 grams for that blend. And then they could have anywhere from, 10 to 50 ingredients listed under that blend.
Mm-hmm.
The only requirements are that the ingredients are listed in order of occurrence. So the first ingredients listed are the ones that are the greatest proportion in that blend, and so on. And then that the total blend is listed. But when you list a proprietary blend, you do not have to test for any one of those ingredients. There's no way to, right? Because you're not disclosing the actual amount of that ingredient. So it's a way, one, to get around label testing. And two, you could also say, like, I don't know, let's say ingredient X is like the greatest ingredient. There's a bunch of research showing that it's helpful for all of these things, but it's really expensive.
Yeah.
So I could have, a 3 ingredient blend, and 99% of that 5 grams could be my first ingredient, which is just like does nothing.
Yeah.
And 0.5% could be that ingredient X, which is really expensive. But now I can tell you that I have ingredient X in my product, right? I haven't told you how much. You don't know if the dosage is, one that research or science has shown to be effective. And so these are used like across the supplement space, but especially in things like pre-workouts and things like greens. And that is another thing I think that distinguishes our brand from other brands, in that, like, if you look at our greens, yeah, we may not have, 500 ingredients, but the ingredients we've picked are curated to be effective based on the science. And we're going to tell you exactly how much is in there, and it's going to be at an effective dose, and our product is tested for that dose. So you know what you're getting, as opposed to, being fed what I consider like a line of marketing BS.
God, I had no idea about that.
I have one more question while we're talking about how to pick something good for you.
Yeah.
I was recently shown a new website that I think right now is free, but some of it might sit behind a paywall eventually, called Suppco, where you can put in your supplements that you're taking and it ranks them. And I don't know. A colleague showed this to me the other day. He's like, yeah, I put all my supplements in here and it rated them if they were good supplements or high quality or not high quality. And it was interesting because it seemed like I think they're building the database, and how they build their databases, they're having these beta users load information into it and go back in. But just the consistency of using a tool like that, the equity is not the right word, but the accountability of using a tool like that on the back end. Have you been exposed to anything like that as people are trying to navigate this space?
I have. I mean, I've been exposed to Consumer Lab a little bit, which I think that's a great site. They rank supplements on very clear categories, so like what grade your supplement's getting in a particular category. I don't know enough about Suppco. I'd say the only time when those get dangerous is if it's a pay to play on the brand side of it. Really, like there should be no brand involvement other than providing samples to be tested.
It's like a .org. As we were talking about all these different supplements, because I think creatine's having a moment, omega has had a moment, and it keeps kind of moving through. Is there something on the horizon that you're kind of looking at saying, this one might pop, and you might want to just be watching for the research to come on XYZ?
Oh, this gets to me not being able to spend enough time in the research anymore because I'm spending too much time on the business side. In terms of sports performance, I think we're starting to see bicarbonate having a moment, but that's a tricky one in terms of dosage. It can lead to a lot of stomach upset. In terms of general health, I haven't seen too much. I think people love to talk about probiotics, but I think the research there is very gray. I think if anything, eat a lot of fiber, eat the rainbow in terms of fruits and vegetables, and you're doing what you need to for your gut health. Probiotics I don't take unless I have just been given a treatment or a course of antibiotics from my doctor. Then but in terms of incorporating probiotics into my diet via yogurt or kimchi or kefir, like, yes, that 100%.
Yeah.
I think prebiotics are an interesting one that I see more and more positive research on to help, promote a healthy microflora. I think part of it is we just don't know exactly what a healthy microflora looks like just yet. So I will say I need to dive into the research more. I'm not in it as much as I used to, but those are two things that I'm constantly watching.
One thing that I would be curious about in the future is if you were to look at, because we're learning so much about hormone impact, peri and postmenopause. And so if there was ever sort of a body of research around, as you're marching through this menopause roller coaster, are there supplements that you should consider changing dosages on or adding into your protocol based on where you are in that roller coaster march? Because right now, everything is either the same supplement, same dose, no matter when. And the add-ons are either like, adaptogens or nootropics, but there's nothing that really says, hey, when you're all the way through menopause and you've got this bone density thing, triple the dosage of calcium or, something like that.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, in terms of I think it's an important topic. One, I think there needs to be more research into that topic. It's hard to speak to recommendations when we really have been left out of the scientific research piece of it. Women as a whole, but also women entering perimenopause and women that are in menopause. So I'm glad to see it being something that's discussed more, in hopes that we're going to see more research in that space. I think a lot of the things we've already talked about, because as I mentioned quickly, as we see hormones drop, that has a negative impact both on our ability to maintain, let alone add new muscle, and a negative impact on bone density. So that's where resistance training, increasing your protein intake, considering creatine supplementation, all of that comes on board. I am very hesitant to recommend adaptogens as a whole, just because I do think the research is really lacking. Everybody's different. I don't think there's a problem with trying things. And if you find something that works for you, that's great. But in terms of blanket recommendations, as we enter that phase of life, I don't feel like the research supports it.
And I do want to kind of double down on bone health. And, we talk about kind of correlates of bone health, making sure we have enough lean muscle, doing resistance training, all which we know stimulate bone health. But do you think, I felt like, for a long time, calcium had this moment of glory and everybody needed to be on calcium and people were taking like 25 tums a day and all these things. And then it's kind of gone away and been replaced by these other things. Do you think there's still a role for a more direct bone targeted supplement that women, especially maybe if they're having problems or just doing some of those other interventions, they're not seeing the results that they are expecting?
Yeah, so I think this gets back to the vitamin D. I would throw K in there as well. I think starting with some kind of blood marker assessment, so looking at where your nutrition has gotten you thus far, and what that, if supplementation is needed, maybe how much supplementation. Right? Vitamin D deficiency, magnesium deficiency. These are things that we know from large studies, not even in kind of the perimenopausal, menopausal space, but population wide are an issue. And so it's likely that they're going to continue to be an issue. Both vitamin D and K have direct correlates to bone health. But I'm once again hesitant to make blanket recommendations without people going and getting those levels tested, because there are so many differences between, not just diet, but also lifestyle that would contribute to where you fall on that range. But I think those are good places to start. And, there's interesting things coming out all the time, like vitamin D. Often people take it, don't supplement with magnesium. There's significant amount of research showing that, magnesium is important in terms of vitamin D supplementation, because it converts vitamin D to its active form in the liver. And so we see people recover from vitamin D deficiency much more effectively when they're supplementing with magnesium and vitamin D than when they're supplementing with vitamin D alone. So getting that nutritional panel and seeing where you fall in that range, and then deciding what to supplement from there on. if you're getting enough calcium in your diet, potentially you don't need to supplement.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah.
That just creates such a complete picture, kind of going back to what we said at the very beginning, that supplements are a supplementation. And so kind of knowing what your full picture is, knowing where you're deficient, and then using a supplement even to help catch you up. Maybe you don't need to be on it long term while you're making these dietary changes and some other things that might take a little bit longer just to give you a boost to get there.
Yeah. But as you're describing it too, that I'm sure it's different with every situation and supplement, but there's probably also some sort of a expectation setting around how long until you can see results. Like, is this 30, 60, 90 day commitment? Like, it's not, take 3 of these and you'll be fine in the morning kind of thing, so getting that in people's heads as well.
And I think too, getting people accustomed to the idea of asking for nutritional panels regularly from their general practitioners and getting an idea of how nutritional needs change with time. Like I think iron is a great example of that, right? Where iron supplementation for a woman that's menstruating, that might be a vegetarian or vegan, will look very different as that woman enters menopause and isn't menstruating any longer. Like potentially that supplementation is not needed anymore, or the amount of iron she may need in her diet is greatly reduced. Yeah. So knowing where your baseline is, because you're getting that tested regularly, and most insurance companies should cover it. You don't necessarily, Inside Tracker is great, but it is very expensive and inaccessible to many. And so asking, your insurance companies what's covered, and then asking your general practitioner to do those regular tests. And so you can get that baseline and know where you are, I think is an important place to start.
Yeah. I even talk with people now and say, take Function Health or Inside Tracker and just take it into your practitioner and ask for the panels. Even if they are not 100% covered, they will be covered out of pocket much more than the consumer price, which,
absolutely
is a business model challenge, I'm sure. But
absolutely.
Well, I know we're kind of coming to the end of our time, and I want to make sure that we have a chance for Shannon to highlight what's going on at Gnarly.
Yes.
Product as well as either events or, content awareness.
And where can people find you? What's the best way to get your products, et cetera?
Yeah, so our website is gonarly.com. Can always buy direct from us, which we appreciate. We're on Amazon. We're on, fueling websites like The Feed. We're trying to expand our retail presence. So if you want us in a retailer near you, reach out and let us know. But we are in climbing gyms, in run shops, in, boutique fitness centers, all over the place. We're trying to get into some bigger retailers. But the easiest way is pretty much our website. And I think what we're trying to do with Gnarly moving forward is what I touched on earlier, which is really open up the brand to people of all different shapes, sizes, interests, colors, backgrounds. I think for a long time, we pigeonholed ourselves as sports nutrition brand for mountain athletes. And that's because that's what we were. And I was getting all these feedback from people I would interact with and talk about the brand to, that, your brand is too extreme. That's not for me. I'm like, but it's whey protein that tastes great, and vegan protein, it's for everyone. One of my favorite stories is we have this customer that's almost 80 years old that has been a customer of ours since I've been at Gnarly, and she emails me pretty much every year, and she always uses caps lock, so it comes across as this very shouty email, but she literally tells me that she could not live without our vegan protein. She doesn't know what she would do. It's what she uses mostly for her meals. And having interactions like that with our customer base, I wanted everyone to feel like our products could help them on their journeys. So we're really trying to open up the brand and make it more approachable and accessible to everyone.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being the leader that you are. Thank you for doing the right thing and authentically in a space that's really competitive, and where, in our experience, people are cutting corners. And so it's just great to see an amazing female leader taking charge and leading in a very authentic way. And so thank you. for what you're doing.
Thank you for making it easy.
Thanks so much.
Making it easy for us to do the right thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yay.
And we'll link all of the how to find you guys in the show notes. Our wheels are spinning, and I know they're spinning about the same thing about a couple people we would like to connect you with, where we are frequently together working out, doing things with a group of women that are very excited about exploring more in these spaces and learning more. And we're trying to help a friend fill her retail side with really reputable products that really help women perform better in these spaces, and men, but kind of geared more towards women. So awesome. Well, thank you.
Yeah, I would love that. Thank you
so
to
much.
you both.
Thank you.
What a fun conversation.
So we were so excited to have Shannon O'Grady with us today and learn so much. We just want to recap, sharing her story as transitioning midlife into the CEO role, learning all about Gnarly nutrition and really what midlife women need to be focused on, going back to consistency, creatine, vitamin D, omega-3s, and knowing that using your labs and metrics to really dial in how you use your supplements, to remember they are a supplement, not the baseline. We want to make sure you can find all of these wonderful supplements at gonarly.com. They're also available on Amazon and in some retail centers, which they are expanding. Please make sure to use our affiliate link with Go Gnarly for 15% off, and we'll include that in the show notes. And remember, if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe and send us your feedback, and we'll talk to you soon.
And share it with more midlife
women.